Hi, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining our autumn release webinar. So today, as ever, we're going to be covering 845 through 847. The last few builds that our development teams have been working on. 847 is due to release this week, hasn't quite come out yet, but we've got some of the items that we can show you. So looking at today's agenda, we've got the usual team here, so Mark and Tom joining us from the customer accounts team, and we're going to be going through a variety of different topics. We've got some quite exciting ones, things like electronic charge sheets, which should make the issuing of charges in sort of an outpatient or inpatient setting a bit quicker, and stop forms getting passed back to reception and things like that. We've got a new and improved way of holding deposits or payments against bookings so that they automatically release onto the invoice when the final invoice is produced. And there's a variety of slides we'll go through first for some of the items that don't quite need a full demonstration. So as ever, we've got the Q&A panel open as part of this webinar. So if you've got any questions as we go along, pop them in there. We'll try and answer them as we go through, or otherwise there'll be a session at the end for us to go through them as well. So starting off with the items that we're just going to go through on slides. So the first one is our Clinicians app. So as you're aware, our Clinicians app has been out quite a while now, and it was really designed for medical secretaries or consultants to be able to see their diaries remotely when they're away from the hospital, or to be able to make remote bookings into those diaries and things like that. So for some of our customers, they use the orders screen within the Clinicians app, and it's a way that they can message the consultant from Compucare when a new radiology report or a new laboratory set of results comes back for a patient, and effectively the consultant gets a message saying there's new results for you to go and view. They click onto it, launches them into the screen that you can see on screen here, this orders screen. And the little change that we've made now is to hyperlink the patient number just the same way as it's done in Compucare. So when you do that, it then allows the consultant to drill through from that patient's results into the simplified EPR view for that patient, but also to be able to have a look at their notes or their attachments and alerts and things like that, or to drill through to other exams and PACS image links and things like that. So moving away from the Clinicians app, we gave you a sneak preview of this at the summer release webinar, and this was our dark theme. So we've done a little bit more to this now, and we've changed the way that the scheduler looks in dark theme as well. So we've still got the blue for outpatients and the red for surgery with regards to the clinicians' diaries, the greys when there isn't availability set and things like that. But you can see we've just gone for quite a sort of low contrast view on this. So again, I think this will be the first time that a number of sites will be looking at whether they use this dark theme or not. And the way that you set it is we've left it up to each user. So down in the bottom left-hand corner of your Compucare system, like mine showing here, you've got a little icon or some initials for yourself. You click on that, you click on user settings, and then there's an option per user for them to decide whether they want to be in dark theme or in light theme being the one that you're used to at the moment. So obviously some users just prefer it. We've all got that sort of option on our smartphones now and things like that. There's the obvious thing of saying, well, people who are working in radiology might want it in dark theme mode and things like that, but we think it's just going to be user preference really. And you'll see the guys today when they're presenting some of the live demo that there'll be a mixture of the system getting presented in dark or light theme. So as we go through, one of the next ones that we wanted to talk about was a change that has happened in July, which was around the recording of integrated care boards. So this is a bit of a complicated one to explain, but essentially for those customers that have NHS patients coming through their facilities, it's likely that you were billing back to a CCG. And there's now no such thing as a CCG. A CCG is what's called a sub-ICB, a sub-integrated care board. So above a sub ICB, there is now an integrated care board. And so what we've done is we've added, as you can see in the middle of the screen here, an option to be able to record the top level of ICB against what was formerly a CCG. So on mine here, I've got an example of NHS Lincolnshire, which would have previously been the CCG. And then above that is NHS Lincolnshire Care Board under a slightly different code. Now, these used to be, instead of ICBs, they used to be called STPs, Sustainability and Transformation Partnerships, whatever one of those was. But again, it's just allowing you to record this should you need to. There's a couple of other things that we're doing. One is to have a look at how the data that we receive from the NHS regarding GPs and practices might start to reference this data. And the other thing that we're looking into at the moment but haven't seen so far are any requests to produce any of the statutory reports out just yet to this top level of ICB. So it's kind of a change that we've put in the system to allow you to record it. We just don't know how you're going to use it quite yet. So I would imagine one of the next webinars will cover that. So if I move on, one of the other bits that we've done, this is just a change on patient email settings. So previously you could record the patient's and pull through the patient's Compucare ID in there. And that was going to be useful for those customers using our patient portal. So Dear Stuart, there's correspondence on the portal for you. But actually what you couldn't do was the bit of Dear Stuart. You could only say Dear Patient. And by the way, here's your patient ID to log in with. We've now made it so you can insert lots more fields into the patient email body to make it a bit more personalized for each patient that you're sending, say, a copy of an appointment letter to, or a copy of a debtor letter to, and things like that. So again, you can just come to system settings, that little hyperlink that it's showing just where it says patient email body. If you hover over that, it will tell you what's available. And then you can see in my little example here, I've got well, as would come out, it'd say Dear Mr. Stuart Heimers in this case, but you could just say Dear Stuart and things like that. So a few more options for you to play with in there and for you to have a look at in your test system. So the next thing that we've changed is around waiting lists. So waiting lists are used quite heavily within the system now for starting to triage patients when the referrals are received or when they need to be put on to further waiting lists for needing radiology or a surgery booking to be made and things like that. And sometimes if you've got users who perhaps haven't gone via the waiting list app, and they've gone perhaps directly to the diaries and made a booking, you get this option come up at the end that I've highlighted on screen called Remove from Waiting List. And previously what would have happened if you'd clicked that is it would have come up with a tiny little drop down underneath that might have just about had the wording of outpatient follow-up required or inpatient booking required and things like that. And if you'd got perhaps a couple of inpatient booking required ones. So maybe if you're thinking of patients that need to have a left side and a right side done at different points in time, it was a bit impossible to work out which one you were picking. So now what we've done is we've changed that. So instead of a tiny little drop down, when you click that button, what it'll do is open up a whole grid of data and say, okay, well, which waiting list entry are you removing them from as part of this booking that you've just made? And just like other grid screens in Compucare, you can reorder these columns, you can switch off columns that you don't want to see, turn on other ones and things like that. But hopefully this just makes it slightly easier for people to clean up old waiting list entries as they're going through and booking patients if they haven't gone from the waiting list directly. So the next one that we've got is a small one in medical record tracking. This one I've just done as a slide, but there is a part in my live demo later on around medical record tracking as well. So this one here is currently you can check records out to different people in different locations. Traditionally would happen. So patients come and see Dr. Jones. We need to get that medical record file pulled in time for that clinic. But actually there can be ad hoc requests for the patient file as well. So if you imagine someone that wants to do a clinical audit on a random selection of files or something like that, we've made it now so that you can batch scan to check out files. They don't have to be reserved beforehand. And you can also now put in some checkout notes, which is the little field that I've got highlighted here. So you can say, not just in the drop downs on the left hand side, who are they going to and where are they going and things like that. You can also put a note as to why. So the clinical audit teams decided that they want to have a look at these, or the finance team has requested them for some reason and things like that. But as I say, I will come back to medical records in the live demo as well. So the next one is going to need a little bit of config your side if you're going to use it, but the idea of it is it's going to save a couple of clicks for your consultants primarily. So where you've got your consultants logging into the system and filling out their appointment notes and outcoming the appointment and requesting the procedure that they want the patient to have. Currently, when you do that in the system, it asks the consultant, even though they've said that they're going to be doing a W4200 knee replacement or a 3712 hip replacement, it asks them to specify the procedure site. So it asks them in a little drop down to pick knee again or pick hip again and things like that, which is a couple of extra clicks that they don't need to be doing. So what we've done is we've changed the procedures code table. So this is if you're an admin user, you can go and do this. And we've now got that little field right at the bottom of my screenshot there called default site. So we can make it so if it's a knee replacement, guess what? The procedure site's going to be knee. And so once you've set that up, what happens is when you're going through and adding a procedure or a planned procedure for a patient, it'll auto-populate that section with knee, just saving a couple of clicks for the consultant. Now, when you're looking at your procedures code table, obviously there's thousands of procedures in there, and you know it'd be quite cumbersome to go and go through all of these. What I'd suggest you do is you've got your report generator, you're able to produce statistics on the numbers of procedures you do, and you can rank them by the ones you do most of and things like that. And if you started it that way, at least you can start to chip away at the main procedures that you're doing and save those clicked presses for the consultants, and then you can just gradually move on to other sections of the lists. So the next one that we've got is around episode of care cleanup. So as you know, an episode of care is the patient's referral into the hospital, and then all of the other activity attaches to this. So that patient's outpatient appointments for consults, for diagnostics, that patient's surgeries and inpatient stays, any post-op visits and things like that. Now, depending on where your hospital's located, you know, particularly if you're in central London, sometimes you'll find that the patient's perhaps been seen by the consultant down the road at Harley Street or at one of your competitors, but is coming into you to have their inpatient stay and procedure done, but is then perhaps going to have their follow-up somewhere else and things like that. So it can be quite difficult to understand when to clear up episodes of care, those referrals, as to when we want to close them down, because we don't necessarily know at the point that we've discharged the patient that they're never coming back to us again. Sometimes that's really left in the hands of the consultant or the medical secretary or the patient to choose where they're going to be seen and things like that. So we introduced a little while ago this episodes of care cleanup, where you can say, find me episodes of care between this old date range, and if you find any where there's no future planned activity, no incomplete records that still need to be finished off and things like that, then complete them with this reason. So you could perhaps go through all of 2020's episodes of care and clean them up and go, well, if we haven't seen them since 2020, let's not worry about it. And so what this would do is it would go through, and if it came up with a problem, it would stop the process completely, which was a bit poor. So what this now does is it will go through, and for the ones it can complete, it will go through and set in this little example, no treatment required, or could be, you know, episode of care, auto close, or whatever reason you want to put to that. But it will then give you a list of ones that it couldn't do for some reason, and then you can have a look at that list, and you can go manually sort out what's wrong with them and then close them down. So it just really, this change is about making sure that that process continues to run and closes what it can do, rather than stopping you know, full stop with it all. Okay, so the next one then is in the people area, and it's specifically to do with the referrer role. So picture this as being GPs. So we get an update from a service called TRUD. It's an NHS data service, and we get the GPs and the practices. And then when you want to look for Dr. Smith in a particular practice in your town, you can find them, you can pull them into Compucare, and then that's what you can start to record against the patient as a registered GP in practice, or against the referral record, that episode of care, to say this is who's referred the patient in. Now, we have a problem with this data set. And it's in the way that we receive it, and it's basically to do with GPs that have a special interest in something. So my GP happens to have a special interest in dermatology, and what it means is he runs separate dermatology clinics in his own GP practice and things like that. But what can happen in the TRUD data is you can end up with brackets GPSI, GPSI, in the name of the doctor, and there's all sorts of funny formattings that can come through for other reasons as well. And the trouble is we can't correct those. It needs to be corrected at source, and of course getting the NHS to correct their national data sets is cumbersome in itself to get organised through those teams. So what we've got here is we've got the ability to mark a GP record as being exempt from being updated again by the quarterly updates from TRUD. And so if you can imagine, you've had a Dr. Gypsy Smith has come in, and we obviously know that it should just read Dr. Smith. You can go and correct that record, make sure it reads as Dr. Smith, and then you can tick this and say, don't overwrite the corrections that I've just made. So this is good for Compucare because it means your Compucare system and the way you reference registered GPs and referrers is shown in a uniform way that your users are going to understand. It also means that your letters going out to those GPs, perhaps when you discharge a patient from your service and things like that, are going to be addressed professionally and things. But it also means for those customers that have links to other systems, so maybe radiology, or maybe laboratory, or anything really, any of the ologies, it basically means that if we're passing across that GP data to those systems, we can keep that clean as well and not have one quarterly update it in Compucare, and then also go and update it all downstream and end up undoing all the good corrections that you've made. So little toggle there. If you find it's a problem for GPs in your area, that's how you use it. But otherwise, there's a video in the release notes about this as well. Okay. Over the last few builds, we've also been making some changes to the system to refactor some of the code for the screens that you're using, and to try and look at more efficient ways to pull the data back and things like that. So in the summer webinar, we showed you that on things like the Outpatient Bookings app and the Inpatient Bookings app, we've now made it mandatory when you open those from the home area to specify a date range. And that was just really because it's super inefficient to bring back all data from all time. So it ends up slowing the system down trying to open those screens and things like that. So we'd already improved those apps, and we'd also improved the scheduler, so the big diary screen that you use to make your outpatient and your theatre bookings and things like that. We've just taken this on a little bit further and started to look at trying to improve some of the other screens. So one area that we've done is next free, and in particular next free appointment searching when it's a multi-booking. So this would be where you need to book a cardiologist, then some time on the treadmill, then back with a cardiologist, or it might be if you're doing ophthalmology where they're seeing a nurse or an optometrist first and then the ophthalmologist later and things like that. So on our tests, we've found that actually the refactoring of the code and the changes that the development team have made is we're seeing that as 70 to 90% faster based on the different types of combinations you can have in your searching. So hopefully sites that use those next free options will see that that's quite a lot quicker now. Within the Orders app, we have implemented the mandatory date filters as well, because why would you ever want to bring back all radiology requests or all lab requests for all time. It's just inefficient. And the guys have also found some code improvement as well in there just to speed things up a little. Beyond that, just looking at the 3 icons across the bottom, we've made similar changes within surgical bookings, just like we did within outpatients and inpatients apps. So again, you should see those records returning a little bit more quickly and things like that. On the patient ledger side, we've seen the patient transaction screen mainly. So when you're trying to have a look at bringing back that patient's invoices, credits, payments, refunds, adjustments, etc., that's a bit quicker. But also these apps you can open from the home screen, so you're bringing back much more data. So again, you should see that patient transactions from the home screen and patient aging and things like that is a little bit quicker to open. And the last one is to do with letters. So when I'm making a booking in the system, I go through, I book Stuart in for 10 o'clock next Tuesday or whatever it happens to be. And then you print me an appointment letter, and that print to screen of the appointment letter to sort of see it over there on the right hand panel used to take a few seconds to open, and now it's near enough instant, to be honest, testing it this morning. So again, hopefully you'll just see that there's some areas of the system that have gotten a little bit quicker for you. Okay, I'm going to come back to live demoing later on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hand you over to Mark now, who's going to start to take you through the first of some of the items that he's got to show. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much for that, Stu. So good morning, everyone. So just as Stu mentioned, I'm just going to run through a few of the enhancements we've done between 8.45 and 8.47. So to get us started, just to remember, there is our Q&A panel in the chat. Please feel free to use that, post any questions you've got as we're going along, as we're doing the enhancements. We have got a team behind the scenes who are just going to have a look at those and answer them for you. Or we do have a bit of a Q&A session at the end where Stu will answer some of the questions that have come up as well. So jumping into it, the first one I wanted to show you is we've had a bit of feedback from clients that when they're entering a new patient into the system, they'd like something like a duplicate checker, just so they can see if that patient's already in the system or something like that. So we've allowed for this now, and what we've done is we've just set up some new settings around it, and we'll have a look at it in action as well. So just to get us started, I'm just going to go into the patient settings screen, and the new settings that you'll see are just down here at the bottom. So you can see we've got a new toggle that we've included, which is the enable duplicate check for new patients. So this will automatically be toggled off in your Compucare systems. So you will need to toggle it on. Once you've done that, it will just pop up with this criteria and threshold score underneath it. So just to have a look through this and what it's doing. So the threshold score, what it's saying is that any patient in the system that reaches over this threshold score of 80, they'll pop up as a duplicate if you're entering new patient information. And the way that they can meet that threshold score of 80 is they've got to reach the criteria below. So you can see we've kind of assigned weighting to each of the different criteria here. And once they've made up, so they'd have to get 4 of these 20 results to get the 80, they'll pop up on the side panel presenting themselves as a duplicate. I have included a few here, which includes things like forenames and surnames, which score them 20 points each. I've got like dates of birth and address lines and phone numbers in there as well. This is kind of just an example of what you might have set up in your system. You might want the threshold score slightly higher just to show less duplicates and things like that, if you've got an absolute one in mind for that. What we'll do is when we post the knowledge base article for this piece of work, I think what we'll do is we'll put in there a suggested criteria, just so you've got something to work off to get started off, and then of course you can kind of chop and change that as you go along to how it suits your system. So if we have a look at how this is working, I'm going to do it from the home screen here. So if we go ahead and start to register a new patient, I'm just going to put in the search there so it pops up. So I'm going to start filling in a few of the details, and what you should see is according to that criteria that we had set at the bottom there, it should start popping up with some duplicates on the right hand side. So if we just fill in some of this information. So I'm just going to put in an address as well, so hopefully this should start triggering it in a second. And if we search for that, type the road. So you can see it's already triggered. So we can see what we filled in there is we've just filled in some of the name details. So if you can remember on that criteria, we had 20 points associated to the family name there, 20 points to the given name. We also had 20 points to the postcode and 20 points to the individual address lines and things like that as well. So you can see, because it's now hit that threshold score of 80, it's popped up with this patient. It's saying, well, actually, this patient's got similar details to that. Is this potentially the patient you think that it might be? As we start to fill in more information, so if I fill in a phone number, for example, we can see it's popped up with another one. So it's increased the score of this top one because it's now gone ahead and matched another field. So because that's the same as well, it's saying, well, actually, this is probably even more likely to be the patient you're looking at. It's also popped up with another one underneath. You could see Rodney Holder here. This is probably because he's now matched the 80 threshold that's required. So even though he didn't meet the given name there on the Jeff, he probably met the main phone number. So this could be people that are living in the same household or something like that. So now we've got those popped up, there's a couple of different things you can do. You can start to review these. So what it'll do is, for standard users, it will say that you have to review them before you can move on. You can see it's got this little clock icon next to them. It's just suggesting that you haven't reviewed the potential duplicates yet. So you do need to do that before you move on any further. If you go into the review screen, what it's going to do is it'll pop up with the first one for you. You can see we've got a little 1 of 2 here. So this is the first individual that we was talking about. Obviously, you're quite likely to have other information in there. So if you've got the patient on the phone as you're doing this bit of the process, you can kind of confirm more information. Say, is this the full address? Is this your GP practice? Things like that. Date of birth. So you can then go and start confirming if this is actually the patient that you're looking at. You can open the patient in their patient area, so you could do that as well. And if you then go on to decide, well, actually, this is the patient that I'm talking to on the end of the phone, you can go ahead and select them, and that'll just pull their details in as well. So there is a permission where you can bypass this situation. You can see I've got a little save with potential duplicates button popped up here in orange. So in the patient settings, there's a new security role called create patient without reviewing potential duplicate records. So it'll just let you move through this process without doing them. Again, that's automatically off, so that's something you would have to toggle on. You can see, because we've reviewed the first one at the top there, it's just put a tick next to it. So it's just letting us know that we've reviewed that first one, but we haven't reviewed the one after it. So you can see, if you go back and forth between screens, it will just give the users information on what they have and haven't done. Perfect. So that's everything I wanted to show you for that one. Moving on to the next one. So prior to this next user story, we've been told users have found it difficult to make patient bookings. This is because primarily they're using the scheduler at a room or theatre level. Therefore, they couldn't see if a clinician had suspensions against their availability. This might be for something like lunch or something like that. So if we just go in and set up some availability first, just so we can see this working, I'm going to go into Dr. Wilson here. So I'm just going to set up a new availability for outpatients. And I'm not going to fill in all the information. I'm just going to fill in the room information, because obviously this is what we're toggling by in the scheduler. So we need to fill that information in. That's important for this one. So we're just going to say it's going to be every week on a Tuesday. I'm just going to set it for a few weeks going forwards. And we'll say that it's running from 9 o'clock until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's everything I need to fill in for that. So if we just click save. And you can then add the suspension as well if you want there. So if we go ahead and add that suspension, I'm just going to do it as a lunch break one, just so we can see it working. You can see we've got all information already filled in because it's pulled that through for us. So we'll say that the suspension is going to take place between 12 and 1, for example. And it's going to pull it through for these dates below. So if we just save that as well and click finish, you can see it's popped into our availability there. So if we go into the scheduler, I have already got this set up. So if we just have a look at today's date, hopefully what that should do is, you can see as the resources, I've just got a filter already set up. So it's pulling through a couple of consulting rooms that we can have a look at. You can see this is the availability that we've just set up. So we've got Dr. Wilson's availability there on the left-hand side, and the information as you hover over it there. And it's also pulled through that clinician suspension at the lunch break. So you can now see that at a room level as well. You'll notice, because it's a clinician-based suspension, it's got a little lock next to it, so it won't let users move this around. So if you do try and move it, it won't let you do that. So it's worth bearing that in mind. Just as an extra piece of functionality we have added as well, this will be released in 8.47, we're just waiting for it to release currently. So we've now added the ability as well to add recurring suspensions for the same day to a clinician's availability. This might be useful to add time to clinician schedulers for things like writing up notes. So what you can do is, if we just have a think about Dr. Wilson's availability here, you might want to add a gap in every hour for 20 minutes for clinician note write-up or something like that. So it'll put that recurring suspension throughout the day for you. We should have a user video that comes up against that on our roadmap that Stu will kind of talk you through at the end. So you should be able to see that in action when that's been released. So moving on to the next one, I wanted to have a look at our estimated tools. We've added a bit of functionality to these as well. So the first one that I'm going to do is in our outpatient estimator tool, you can now flick a toggle, and what that'll do is it will just let you suggest whether that appointment is a new appointment or a follow-up appointment. It just makes users' lives a little bit easier when they're doing estimates, so they don't have to add extra charge information at the grid at the bottom. It's just a toggle now, just to make their lives a bit easier on that. So what I'm going to do is, before we get started, I'm just going to run into a contract so I can show you what I've got set up so we can see it pulling through when we look at the live example. So in my self-pay outpatient contract, you can see I've got a billing rule set up here. And this is just for attendance charges. So you can see we've got the first charge and follow-up charge. If we just drill into those a little bit more, you can see against the new appointment charge, I've set some fees up there for about £150 for that appointment. And if we go into the follow-up one, I've got some fees against that one as well. I think this is £120. So what we should see is when we've got this contract on the estimator set up, and when we just flick that toggle, it should just start pulling through those charges for us. So if we go into the estimator tool, outpatient estimate, I'm just going to fill in some blank information here. So I'm just going to pull a patient in, and we just pull that purchaser and things through, so it pulls through the correct information that we set up on the contract. You can see it's pulled through the contract that we were taking a look at. So the new toggle is follow-up one at the bottom here. So I'm going to leave it off for the moment. I'm not going to put any extra charge information in, just so we can see purely what it's doing on this one. So if I go ahead and click the estimate, you can see once we pull that up, it's pulled through the new appointment attendance charge at £150. So similarly, if we just go the other way with that one and flick it on, this should then pull our follow-up charge through. So you can see it's pulled that through for £120. So that's just something we've added just to make users' lives a little bit easier when doing estimates for patients. Something else we've added, again, it's a little bit of an extension on this one. We've now done audits on estimates. This is a bit of background work that we've done just so that we can set up future things. So moving forward in the next few builds, we'd expect to be able to extend the Estimator app or build a new app to show previously given estimates and also make bookings from those estimates as well. So this is just kind of some of the background work we've been doing. You can see it's pulled through the follow-up attendance charge on that one and the new appointment attendance charge as well. It's just some of the background work we've done to get started on the work on that. So hopefully in the next webinar, we should be able to show you some progression with that as well. So sticking with estimates, I'm just going to move on to an inpatient estimate thing that we've added as well. So if we go into the inpatient estimator, again, I'm just going to fill in some standard information. So I'm just going to pull through a patient. And of course, we're just going to pull through the contract information again. Perfect. So the new thing we've added here is we've just enhanced this bed bookings part of the estimator. Previously, if a person was doing an inpatient stay, it will have only given you one option for their bed choice. Of course, with inpatient stays, they might be staying across several different bed types during their stay. So we just wanted to include that information in the estimator just so we can make it a little bit easier for people doing estimates for that type of work as well. So you can see I've got my start and end dates in there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull in some bed charges so we can see it working. You can see as soon as I click that add item, it's just suggesting straight away that you want 24 hours. So it's pulling that from the start and end date that you filled in there. So if we put a room against that, we'll say, yeah, actually they do want to stay against that standard ensuite room. Once we click estimate, of course, that should pull into the estimate, as we can see it's done there. If we then start adding other rooms, you can see it's popped up saying 0 hours. So it's saying you've already allocated what you've got against your start and end date there. So I'm just going to say, well, actually, we think it's going to be a bit of a longer stay, and they're going to have some ICU bed time as well. So if we just add 24 hours against this, what you'll notice is this end date will change. So you can see it's moved on to the 1st to the 12th there, and it's popped that bed in for us. So again, then when we click estimate, it's just going to pull through those charges for us. So it is quite an intuitive tool. It will change the end date and things like that if you start adding more beds on. Another thing it does do is if you change backwards, but don't change the bed allowance that you've kind of put on, it will give users validation warnings. So it's just saying you've actually changed the end time of that one, but according to the beds that you've got in your bed plan, that doesn't quite fit. So it'll give them a few different options. They can either fix the bed plan or fix the end date. If they fix the bed plan, it will start with the last bed and start detracting time, so it meets the start and end date. If you click fix end date, as you would expect, it's just going to push that back forwards to account for the beds that you've got in the plan there. Okay, so moving on from that one, there's a couple of episode of care ones that I want to show you now. So the first one is around URN codes. So again, we received a bit of some feedback from some of our clients just saying when they're filling in that URN code information on their episode of care, they're not getting any pop-ups or warnings when that might already be in the system against another patient. So if we go into episodes of care, and I'm just going to set up a new one because this does pull up when you're setting it up. Again, if I just fill in some information, and we'll fill in that for that one. I'll leave the referral date as it is, and speciality I'm just going to set as cardiology. So this is the field we're kind of interested in here, the URN field. So I'm just going to fill in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 just for this example. When we go ahead and click save, you can see it's just popped up with a warning box. It's saying, well, actually, this URN code is already in use in your system. It will pop up with where it's in use. So you can see it's telling us that Jane Adams, which is patient 32, is using this. Because this is only a reviewing tool that we've built in, it will give users the options to continue. So they can continue knowing that it's got the same code. If they go ahead and press cancel and fill in a different code, for example 2, 3, 4, 5, if that then duplicates again, it will pop up with another warning saying it's duplicated with a different entry, and again it will give you the patient details for that as well. However, if they cancel out of this one, so if they go ahead and click cancel now and then click save, it will actually save that into the system because, like I say, it's just a reviewing tool we've added in, so it's not going to fully stop the users. Great, so sticking with episodes of care, the next one I wanted to look at was an episode of Care Cleanup tool. Obviously, Stu had a talk about this in the slides about some of the enhancements that we've added to this. So following on from that, what you can now do is in the episode of Care Cleanup app, it gives you the ability to select episodes of cares with specific specialities or episode of care sources. So I'm going to use source for this example, but like I say, it does use specific specialities as well, so you can do it that way around. If we take a look at this episode of care that I've got on the screen, you can see that it's an open one. We've got an outpatient booking against it, which has been completed. So this is going to be the one that I'm going to try and pull through. Importantly, to note, the source on this one is the self-referral private. So if we go into that episode of Care Cleanup, I've already got that open. I'm just going to fill in some date information. So I know that this one was during November, so I'm just going to put it across November. So it's going to pick that one up. So these are the new fields that we've added, the episode of care source and speciality. You don't have to fill in both of them. It is just one or the other. So if I go for that self-referred private, hopefully what will happen now is it will just bring through that single episode of care episode that we was looking at. You can see it's saying one episode of care is inactive for this date range. So that's hopefully the one that we wanted to take a look at. I've just filled in the completion reason as the treatment's been completed. Once you press clean up, it's just going to send you out of the screen once it's completed that process. Obviously, if you've got, it should usually pop up with a few more than one you'd expect. So it will take a little bit longer to do that clean up before it pops you back out. If we then go back into this screen, what you should see is we've got a status change on this one. So it's now saying that this record's completed. And it's just given us a completion date and completion reason at the bottom there. So you can see because we popped in treatment completed, that's what it's done against this episode of care. Okay, so moving on to the next one. Again, this is relating to episodes of care. It's just to do with our surgical bookings. So the purpose of this next one is to give users the ability to select an episode of care when using the surgical next free screen, and toggle in the auto create inpatient booking from that as well. So previously in the surgical next free, what it will have done is when you create that surgical next free booking and pull it through into the availability that you want in the slot, it will have automatically chosen an episode of care for you. So what we've now done is we've just given you the ability to choose the episode of care. So if we have a look at this one, I'm just going to fill in some of the standard information. You can see these are the new fields we've kind of got here. So it's asking to select a patient and episode of care. I'm just going to fill in our standard inpatient template because that's what it's going to pull through if you want it to automatically create an inpatient booking. The patient I'm going to take a look at. We should have several episodes of care sources. So in this box here, what we're going to see now is when we select that, it's just going to give us a drop down and it'll just give us the option to pick which one we want to have a look at. You can see I've got one set up for the 24th of the 11th for last week. So if we go ahead and select that and just pull through some of the other information as well. So I'll just put a surgeon in here. So it pulls up some next free information. I'm just going to put that into any theatre, so we'll just go for the 11:45 slot for today. So importantly, the things that we kind of want to look at here is when we look at the patient detail at the top, this is the inpatient booking that it's pulled through as we asked it to do. When we drill into that a bit further, you can see now that it's just pulled through that episode of care from the 24th of the 11th as we asked it to. So that's just giving users a little bit more applicability when they want to add certain episodes of care, and it's not just automatically pulling one in for them. So I've got two more I wanted to have a look at. The first one is an inpatient booking one. So this is something that we've added. We've added a global setting, which I'll show you in a second, which you need to toggle on for this to work. And what we've also done is when an inpatient booking has a procedure against it, if you then go ahead and discharge that booking, it will pull that planned procedure through into the actual procedure. So this is quite useful for our customers that don't have any of our kind of theatre apps and things like that. So if we have a look at the setting first, it's in the scheduling settings. And then the new toggle that you'll see is just this one on the right hand side, which is the auto actualize planned procedures on inpatient discharge. Here's a tooltip, so if users hover over it, it'll let them know what it's doing. So you will need to select that to yes if you want it to pull through those planned procedures to actual procedures when you're discharging. Again, like any toggle that we've got in the system, it will automatically be off, so you do need to change this in your settings and apply it. If we have a look at this in action, I've got an inpatient booking set up that I'm going to use. So we've got Mr. Darryl Jackson at the top here who's admitted, and what we should see is you can see we've got a planned procedure in there. So we've just got a total knee replacement procedure that I've just pulled in. As you'd expect, because it's not been discharged yet, there's no actual procedure when we toggle onto that. So if we go ahead and say that treatment's been completed now, let's just discharge him. So it'll pull up the discharge page as you'd expect, and what you can see is it's actually, when we toggle onto actual, it's pulled through that procedure information for us. So it's worth noting that if before discharging the booking, you add a different actual procedure to this planned procedure you have added in already, the planned procedure will still be added on discharge as well, so users might just need to do a bit of reconciliation where they check the actual procedures just to pull any off that might not be applicable for this particular stay. So the last one I'm going to show you, I can't show you much on this one, but it is one that's worth talking through. The reason I can't show you it is it works in your Compucare service, so this is working in the background of your system. So if we have a look in settings again, I'm just going to go back into the scheduling settings. So what we've done with this user story is it's an automated closure of billing episodes tool that we've added. So you can see it's got a toggle here, so auto close billing episodes within the Compucare service. When we toggle that on, it's going to give us a few more options. Just looking at the bottom toggle that it's pulled up here, it's saying do you also want to auto cancel any planned or due bookings as well. So you can toggle that on, and then it's just going to ask you for a period that you want to have a look at. So anything that's older than, for example, 48 months, or you can fill in whatever's applicable to you there. That's what it's going to use in the background of the system. So once you've toggled that on and applied those settings, what it's going to do is it's going to use that Compucare service in the background. and it will run this in batches of approximately 500 bookings. So the service will run for a minimum of 6 hours in off-peak times. So in terms of what we mean by that is it starts at midnight in your system and it'll run for that maximum period of 6 hours. So it'll run till 6 a.m. in the morning. It'll do them in batches of 500, and if it doesn't complete a batch by the time it reaches that 6 hour deadline, so the 6 a.m., it will just stop running that, process the ones that it's already done, and then it'll switch that off in the service. It's just so we've designed it that way so it's not running during your peak hours. Obviously, we don't want it affecting or slowing down your system or anything like that, especially with the speed improvements we put in already. So that's kind of why it runs out of hours and in the background for you. So perfect. That's the last one I wanted to run through. What I'm going to do is now I'm going to hand you back over to Tom, who's going to run through a few more of the user stories that we've added.
Thanks for that, Mark. Yeah, just before I continue, I'll just offer a reminder, there is a Q&A bar within Teams as well, so if you do have anything, please pop it in there. So the first enhancement I'm going to show you is within Build 846, and we've added a way to restrict outcome based on the cancellation reason. So first of all, I'm going to go into our cancellation reasons code table just to demonstrate this. So you can see I've got the usual cancellation reasons here. I've also added this test cancellation down the bottom for some clarity and just to help explain this this new feature. So I'm just going to go in there and edit it. And within here, you can see the usual name, external code, and we have the outcomes drop-down menu. So I've selected these 3 outcomes. So we've got treatment complete, monitor patient, and cancelled, no further information. So we'll just drop out of there and see this in action. And then we're going to go to our check-in screen. So on the check-in screen, we've got a few appointments there. So we're just going to edit this appointment here, and we will look to cancel. So in the cancellation reason, if I were to select reschedule by patient, for instance, you can see it comes up with all these different drop-down options here. And then if we go to the test cancellation, the new one we've just created for this example, you'll see it reduces the options to the 3 we selected. It is also worth noting that if the cancellation reason only has 1 outcome, it will also populate in here already. Okay, so the next enhancement I'm going to show you that we've added to the system is to allow for the selection of correct letters to be easier by adding an intuitive search function. So it's worth noting that Compucare is intuitive and will auto populate the most frequently used letters when you go into print. However, this feature saves the user potentially scrolling through a long list of letters if there's a different one they're looking for. So we're going to go into our Outpatient Bookings app. And we have a few appointments here, so we'll go on Stephanie Grantham. And if we're looking to print, and we're going to print an appointment letter. So you'll see within the template box here, it is now a search bar. So it's auto populated with the outpatient new appointment letter. But for instance, if I wanted to send a FIN outpatient letter instead, so I can just search for something with PH in there, and you'll see the FIN outpatient letter. And it works that way. It saves you scrolling through a long list of letters unnecessarily. So I'll just drop out of there and back to the home screen. So the next feature that we've also added into 846 is the option to view stock levels when prescribing an item. So I'm going to go into a clinician and do this within our Clinicians app. So if we just go into Dr. Jones, and we'll go into Clinicians View. So you see she does have an appointment today with Stephanie Grantham, so we'll look to just go ahead and start that appointment. So when in the appointment, if the clinician was looking to prescribe an item, we'll go and add the prescription. Drop out of there, sorry. And then on the pharmacy item, for instance, if we were just looking to add codeine, so we'll just have a search for codeine. You'll see we've now added this view stock level button here. So that will give a live update by clicking on it. You can see the stock level there before anything is dispensed, just to give a live update on anything that's going there. So let me just exit out of this. And finally back to our home screen. So the final enhancement I'm going to show you today is the ability to change the layout for e-registration form printout. So when a patient has completed the form electronically on, say, a tablet, it can now be printed in a customized format. This will also support the patient portal as it develops. When a patient completes a form on there, it can be printed in the same way. So firstly, for this enhancement, I'm going to go into our report designer, and I'll just show you the form I've created. So we'll go into our form results here. And you'll see within our form results, I've got the e-registration form created. So I'll just go into edit here. And you'll see the form is loaded. And within the form, you can see it's now customizable with any information you wanted in there as always, and it's all branded up with the hospital title. So coming out there, let's see the form in action. So if we go into a patient, search for Mr. Alan Albert. Hello, and we'll go into the outpatient booking that he has today. So if we're looking to add the form result, and then we'll just search for the registration form. So say this was completed electronically, we'd obviously pre-populate all the information we have in there. Just tick the acceptance and then save that. If we then go back and look at our patient's form results, we'll see the registration form is in there. And if we wanted to print that, we'll see it now loads as the customized form that we created, so it can match in tune with other forms that we have in the system. So there are all the enhancements that I've got to show you today. I'm not going to pass you back over to Stu, who'll bring you a few further enhancements before covering any questions that have been raised throughout the webinar.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Tom. So I've just got a few more enhancements that we'll go through, and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. So first one I want to have a look at is around patient attachment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a patient record, and we'll have a look for Stephanie Grantham. And one of the things that we've done now is to allow, you could always add the attachments to the patient record, but what we've done is we've made it so you can also add them to bookings. So if I have a look at the Outpatient Bookings app, and I've got a couple of bookings here, and you'll be familiar with this grid down this panel down the middle there, where these items start to light up when there are charges or when an invoice has been raised and things like that. We've now got this paperclip icon, and you can see when I click on the MRI one, it's lit up to go dark there. And if I click on that, the reason it's done it is because this is the one attachment that I've got against that booking. So in this case, I've just got a dummy MRI safety questionnaire that I've chucked onto the patient record. But if we were to come back out of that outpatient bookings area and just look at the top, you can see that I've got many more attachments against this patient than that. So either from the bookings app itself, you can go to attach, and then it'll auto populate the options, or we can go through and we can click on to new here, and we can select the episode of care and the booking that we want things to relate to. So again, I could pick an episode of care, it'll then narrow down the bookings. I could then pick the booking, and then I can go through and do the file description and go and find the file that I want to import and things like that. So that change there is just really to make it so if you've got documents that should exist just against an appointment, we can put them down at that level, but then at the top level you can still see everything for all the attachments against that patient. So I'm just going to grab my script, there we go, and we'll move on to the next one. So the next one that I've got is still to do with attachments, and it's to do with a change we made in the last release, which is to have attachments open up directly within the system. So we made it so that documents like Word documents, if they were attached to a patient, would open over the top of the patient record. So I can kind of demonstrate that here. And if I just go on to something like my questionnaires, I've attached a dummy questionnaire now. And if I double click that to open it up, what we've done now is we've created a new image viewer. So instead of just being able to display Word documents that are attached, we can now, if there's an image, so whether it's a TIFF file that's come from a scanner or something like that, we can have that display in the system. The reason why we've done that is for those customers that use Citrix servers to deploy their application, or remote desktop sort of RDS apps and things like that, it perhaps saves them from needing to license Microsoft Office and other applications directly onto those terminal servers. But the actual change here is this image control. So previously we didn't have this, so now you can rotate an image on screen, you can zoom in and out of it and things like that, whereas previously this would have only been doable outside of the system in something like Windows Picture Viewer or something like that. So it's just a small change we've made to kind of build on the Microsoft Word functionality that we did before to display directly in the system. However, having gone through all of that, we did get some feedback from one of our customers around where they have clinicians logging into the system. Quite often there's a requirement to pull up an attachment on one monitor whilst they're still filling out all their notes and assessment forms on the other screen. And that screen that I've just shown you coming up over the top actually got in the way of the consultants doing the note capture that they needed to do. So we've made a change to the system to get around that. And so it's at a system level. If I just go to let's just have a look at system settings. And we will scroll down on here, and right at the bottom, we've now got this option, which I've currently got toggled to yes, which is why mine were displaying over the top of what you could see there. But we've got this open attachments in Compucare. If that's toggled to no, what it will do is it will mean that PDFs or Word documents or image files and things like that all open in their native application. So Microsoft Word or Windows Picture Viewer or Adobe PDF Writer, and so can therefore be dragged off to a second screen and allow you to still keep working within Compucare on the patient that you're on. So depending on how you deploy the Compucare application, or whether you're concerned about licensing of certain elements like Office and things like that, will depend globally on whether you set that to yes or no. Within the application. So just something to have a look at in your test system, and then you can see how you'll use in live. Okay, so going back to Stephanie's record, the next thing I'm going to have a look at is the Correspondence app. So we've made a couple of changes within here. So you can see here I've got various letters within the system, and what I can do is if I click onto my let's have a look at printing this one back off. So this inpatient letter. So it's just going to go through, and I'll just print it to a PDF because I haven't got a printer sort of allocated. So we'll just save that off to document 2 somewhere, pretend it's come out the printer. And when that's gone away, if I have a look at the audit log now against this letter, what we've done is we've made it so that we have an audit to say that that letter has been reprinted and sent by Stuart from this laptop at this date and time. So this is just for the scenarios where a patient is telling you they might not have received a particular letter that you've sent them to do with their appointment or their debts and things like that, and where you go and you resend it by email or by post again to give them another copy. And it's just really keeping a running audit of how many times that's been sent to the patient. So when it was first created, middle of the month, and then me sending another copy today. I think we have had some feedback, so it's something we might look to improve in a future build, but around should it show within here that another copy's gone, or should it show a last sent date and things like that. So we're working with the client at the moment on that, and then we might see some more changes come in, but certainly now that audit log will tell you what's happened and when. One of the other things that we've got is the ability to look at version history for letters. So if I look at the version history of this one, perhaps, I think it was, maybe not. Let's just try the top one. There we go. So on here, I've had a few copies of that letter that have been done. And so what I'm able to do is I'm able to sort of click through them and then have a look. So you can see the very first one that I created had this watermark on it and things like that. And then I made some changes to take the watermark off, and I added this sentencing capitals here at the bottom about not bringing valuables or whatever else I might want to say on that letter. And so what you're able to do is you're able to highlight multiple rows on here, and you'll see now I've got this compare button. And so what I can do is I can look at them side by side and see the changes between the letters as they get recorded within the system. So just something to make as letters are sort of done in draft, and then other people may proofread them or add additional information or requirements to them. It just allows you to see what's gone on and who's modified it and when and things like that. So sticking with the idea of correspondence, the next thing to have a look at is going to be the home screen, and we've got a new correspondence app within the home screen. So if I have a quick look at this for unsent correspondence, and this is going to let me have a look at any letters here that are ready to be sent. So these are finalized but haven't yet actually been sent, and so we've got a couple of letters here that I can sort of multi-tag, or I can review individually, and then I can print or email them all, and then I can mark them as sent as part of the process. So the reason why we put this screen in is if you're using Compucare to produce letters, you're probably quite happy doing that on each individual patient and then sending them off. If you've got other systems that are doing the letters for you, so we've seen this with clients that use like consultant letter systems where their GP clinic discharge letter might be produced and then sent to Compucare, or where you've got specialist systems like say in ophthalmology where you've got information that's very specific to that patient's vision and that you want to pull through and send back to their referring optician and things like that. Occasionally we'll see a correspondence interface being sent back into Compucare, but then the ability to go and print those letters out and send them on meant opening up John Smith's record and Sue Jones' record and things like that. Whereas now with this app in the home screen, we can now filter for anything that's ready to be sent that hasn't yet been sent, and we can go through and we can batch send it if needs be and things like that. So hopefully it just speeds up the process. We've also got some customers outside of external systems that are sending things in where instead of individual bookings users printing or sending letters, for any that need to be printed, they've got a central location that printing's been done from. So again, it's the ability to spool those letters for later and then send them, from a central location. So I'm sure we'll get a bit more feedback on this as people start to use it. But again, that's the reasons why we've added this to the home area. So the next thing to have a look at is going to be around medical record tracking. So I've already shown the piece around in the slides deck around being able to send a batch of records off to a location and record the fact that it was done for audit or that finance needed them for some reason and things like that. Basically, within medical record tracking, we've got the ability to batch barcode scan records. So as we pull them for going off to outpatients for the various clinics that are running that day, or as we return them back into the medical records library, we can use a barcode scanner and batch scan through them. The one area that we couldn't do that on before was either externally storing records when you move them off site because you're not treating the patient presently and things like that, or if they haven't been in a very long time when you're actually destroying the records. So if I just go on to external store here, we've now got this barcode enabled within here. And the fact that you can do things in batches, so I could say these are going off to the on-site archive room, or they're going to some external store. So I'll say they're going to the bunker in this case, and they're going to zone A on whatever date I want to record or whatever reference I want to record around this. And then what I'm able to do is I'm able to start scanning with a barcode scanner. Now I haven't got a barcode scanner attached here, so I'm just going to pick patients individually. But you can see now that you can basically go through and bulk external store those records, zap in with the scanner, and then once you've done that, you can click externally store and it will send them all away. If I come away from there, we've also got the same ability to do it on batch destroy. So I'm not going to go through and add multiple records. You can pretend what that would look like, zapping them with the scanner, but it basically says who's the user doing this. So it's pulled me through. And then what's the notes? Why am I destroying these? So it might be no activity in the last 5 years or 8 years, or whatever our criteria is for when we destroy records. So again, all of this can be done in batch now, so you can do multiple files, and hopefully that just makes the lives of your health records teams a bit easier. Okay, so moving away from correspondence and records and things like that, there's a couple of changes that we've made within the Orders app. So the first one is to do with how we filter for the data that we want to see. So you can see I've got this panel here of various orders tiles, and I've created various filters for ones that need to be vetted or protocoled. I've created one for ones that have been accepted and need scheduling. So I'll drill into that right now. And the main change that we've made really is just to extend the options that are available in the filter panel. You can also see the same options running along the status bar here. So where we've got, say, an MRI that's been requested, so in this case, there's an MRI of the hips has been requested for this patient. It's currently set behind the scenes for when there's an MR requested, someone needs to look at that and decide how long needs to be booked, whether it's clinically appropriate and things like that, whether it needs contrast beforehand. And so we've got the ability to filter now on the side for show me the orders that need to be accepted. So if I was to go through and accept that, it'd get me to go in and put the booking instructions in and things like that. So we could just say 45 mins, no contrast, or whatever we might put in there. So if I save that, that patient's now going to disappear off here because of the filters that I've got. And then if I click onto here and go to need scheduling, I can have a look, and again we can see the ones that have been accepted, and there's Michael Johnson for that MR that needs booking, and then we can go through and schedule it. So I don't think you'll be playing with these filters, you know, all day every day. What I expect that your imaging teams would do, or other departments using this app, is they would create saved filters along the bottom, and then as part of their home screen they would have what they needed to see here and sort of guide them through the dashboard of these are the ones that need to be booked, these are the ones that still need to be checked, these are the ones where we haven't had the report back yet, and things like that. So just a little change to hopefully make it easier to support their workflow. I think one of the other bits that we'll go into is around adding orders. So what I'll do is I'll click on add order, and there's a very tiny change we've made here is this box here. So let's say I am going to pick my patient, and I will pick, I want some sort of MR of the hips or whatever it happens to be. And within here, we've got a box called notes. Well, it's now called clinical notes. So that's just a slight renaming on that, just to make it clearer what we're expecting to go in there. However, that doesn't really tell the person requesting this order, presumably the Dr. Helen Jones in this case, well, what are they actually asking the radiology team to look for, or what are they asking the labs team to look for, and things like that. So we've made a further change within here. So if I go to edit the screen layout, and this is really just as an admin user, I can do this and then deploy it to all users, is now against this field, as well as making it mandatory, which it was anyway, we've now got this ABC box against it, and this allows me to add some notes as to what I'm expecting this field to be used for. So I could put, please enter provisional diagnosis or clinical question, you know, or however you want to phrase it. And so when I save that, you can see now that as well as it being a mandatory field called clinical notes, I've now got that sort of guidance text like we show the consultants on the assessment forms and post-op note records that they fill in, what it is I'm asking them to do. So the hope with this is that the doctor gets it right first time in terms of asking for what they want and why, and specifying exactly why they want it. And then that means that the radiology team checking that request hopefully have to reject fewer of them, you know, and therefore the patients get booked on time, the doctors don't get frustrated and things like that. So I think that's quite a neat little change. The developer that did this actually thought beyond this one request, and that little notes field you can now do anywhere. So if I just come out of that order, we don't need to finish it off. If I go to something like maybe add episode of care, you know, and I go up to edit the screen layout, and I click on something like URN. What's a URN? You know, means nothing to me. You know, actually this could be, this is the NHS unique booking reference number from ERS or something like that. And so, you know, I can now mask text against any field in the system if I feel that the users need a bit more explanation about what's meant to be entered into there. So hopefully you guys will find that useful as well, and we'll see that, you know, guiding your users through better data capture. Okay, so I'm going to move on to some billing and invoicing changes that we've made. So I'm going to go to my check-in screen. And I'm going to have a look at my check-in screen, and on here I've got various patients booked for today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look against Ian Jenkins. So he's been booked in with Dr. Jones, and there's an appointment that was meant to happen at 9 o'clock this morning, bit overdue, but we'll pretend that this is now coming through. So the change that we've made on here is the ability to add a payment to a booking. So previously you had the option of add payment, and what this would do is it would add an unallocated cash payment for, say, a deposit or what we thought the consultation fee might be, so £200 or whatever it is, to the patient's ledger account, but it wouldn't actually be allocated to anything other than the patient. So it would just sit there waiting for the point that someone matched it up with a future invoice. We did already have the ability to do deposits, so less frequent on outpatients, but if you can imagine a self-pay inpatient booking for a hip replacement where the deposit beforehand wants to be £10,000 payable 7 days before or something like that, then we have this deposit required field, as you can see in my reading pane, and that then allowed you to record a deposit against the booking, and then when you raised the final invoice, the two matched against each other. But the piece that was missing was that if I just take a payment where I'm not expecting there to be a deposit, but there needs to be a payment for some other reason, I can actually get this now to allocate against a booking. So if I go against Ian Jenkins here, and I'll go, you can see he doesn't need a deposit, but I'm going to take a payment anyway. And I'm going to take a payment for by cash or check or credit card. Let's say it was cash, probably unlikely, but we'll leave it as is. I can put what it was for in the reference, so I can say paid in advance of likely MRI, and then I can hit save on there. So let's just post that payment. We'll pretend we've given them a receipt if they wanted one and things like that. So if I just zoom into Ian's record and then have a look at the patient record and the patient transactions, obviously you would always expect there to be an unallocated cash payment on account, which is exactly what there is, £500. But now you've got this section here called payment taken for. And this will then show you actually that payment was taken for this booking on the 29th of November. So when I sort of go back to the check-in screen, and let's just, I won't bother arriving Ian, I'll just go straight ahead and complete the booking sort of manually. We'll hit save on there. It'll go through and ask me about adding charges and other things. If I go through and hit, oh, that hasn't brought it up for some reason. I must have done something wrong there. But OK, we'll use Jane Flowers below. So I've billed Jane now. And what's actually happened in the background, assuming that invoice had come to screen, is an auto allocation. So I had a £500 payment on Jane that I took beforehand that was allocated against this booking. And then I've got an invoice that I raised against that booking, which happened to only be £200. So it's basically done the difference between the two. We've wound down the balance of the invoice, and we've got a £300 remaining balance on the receipt ready to go against some future radiology or whatever it might be. So it kind of calls back for those customers that had Compucare 7 to the auto allocate feature that used to exist within the patient ledger. This is just a way of getting money collected against appointments to auto allocate when the final invoice is raised. And you can also see whilst we're in here that we've added a new column to this grid to show you the date of allocation. So if there were a number of different payments, like a deposit payment and then a final payment on the day, or some late charge that was chased up, you'd be able to see the dates of the different payments that were made against this invoice. Now, the data was always here in the grid. It just means you can more easily see what's going on and when they've paid and things like that. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll come away from this patient and I will have a look at the home area. And the next change I want to go into is one to do with making elements of a planned procedure mandatory when the consultant's recording the procedure that they need the patient to be booked for. So there's a change that we've made within the scheduling settings section. So again, you've got to be an admin user to be able to get to that. So I'll go into scheduling settings, and down the bottom here, I've got under waiting list entries, I've got whether waiting list entries that require a procedure, the procedure must be mandatory. So I've toggled that to yes already. And I've also said, and make sure they record a laterality. So what that means in practice is, if we pretend that you've just set those and applied the settings to your system, if you go to the Dr. Jones, sort of pretend we're logged in as Dr. Jones, we've got some appointments for today. Let's go and press play on Stuart's booking. I've left mine blank. Normally there'd be a whole screen here full of all the details that they'd record as a at a follow-up booking and things like that. But actually the field that I wanted is this outcome one. So if I say I want inpatient booking required is my outcome, that's already mandatory to record a procedure. So that bit hasn't changed. So if I hit save on here, it's going to say, well, hang on, you haven't told me what the procedure is. So if I click on the plus there, it's within this screen now that these things are mandatory. Obviously the procedure is, so like W3712, and we'll pick that hip replacement. But it's this procedure site and laterality. Now, the change that I showed you in the slides means that this should pull through with hip automatically. So that bit will be taken out of it, but they'll still have to specify whether it's left, right, bilateral, or whether you don't require to specify and things like that. So it's just meaning that whilst you've got the consultant deciding what they're going to do, you can make them record all the information that you need for when you schedule this for the theatre team. Obviously, the end result of me pressing add on here and then pressing save would be patient gets added to the waiting list procedure required, and then someone else goes ahead and books that. But it's just really a change in here to make sure you get all that data from the consultant at the point that they can enter it. Okay, and the last one that I'm going to go through is around patient charging. So I'm going to go back to my check-in screen, and I'm going to have a look, and I've got a couple of patients coming through my treatment room. Could be nurse pre-assessment, could be phlebotomy room, could be anything. And they're not seeing a consultant, they're seeing another healthcare professional. But what would normally happen in your hospital would be that someone would tick on a sheet to say, oh, whilst I was with the patient, I did X, Y, and Z. So maybe some outpatient nursing type charges. And that sheet would either be given to the patient and they'd take it to reception, or the nurse would pop it round to reception. Then the reception team would have to sit and key charges on. You know, you hope the patient hangs around long enough to get a payment off them. They might go out the door, or you're keeping them waiting. It just wasn't efficient. So what we've done is we've made it so that you can now add a form electronically against a booking, which you could always do, but that you can add charges as part of that form. So if I go to add form result, I've got within here the ability to select a form. So I'm just going to look for a form I've created called outpatient nursing charge sheet. And within here, I've kept mine quite bare. You could have, 50 different items if you wanted. But what I'm doing is I'm saying I've done a dressing change as part of seeing this patient. And maybe I did more than one dressing change, so I can change the quantity. And I've taken a sample for a full blood count or something like that. And then I've got to put in some clinical notes as well on my form. So saw the patient and did something. So what we'll do is we'll hit save on there. And it'll just go through. I can press finish on it. And now this section in the middle is lit up. So if I click onto that, what we've got is the dressing change and the full blood count. So £25 in my case for that, and £123 for the FBC. Obviously, when you come and bill all these charges, it will go through the contract rules engine and price them correctly and things like that, or these charges will get picked up in your work in progress calculations and come out at the right prices. But the idea is that someone can record clinically what they've done, tick, 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 some notes, some drop down fields, etc. And then whatever was chargeable out of that can end up straight away onto the patient's account as outstanding charges. So we think that's going to be quite big, lots of uses for that in private GP or in nurse clinics or in physio, where they've given some consumables that need to be charged that are regular things that they might issue and things like that. Stops them needing to drill out and go to things like add charge and search for the charge and the quantity and the issuing location and hit save. It just means they can do their normal clinical job of recording what they've done, and the rest takes care of itself. So briefly, but I don't want this to be a training session, what we'll do is we'll just have a look at forms and I'll show you how this was set up. So if I look at all my forms, and I'll just have a look for my charge one. So we've got my outpatient nursing charge sheet in the background. These are my questions that I've set up, so my form components. So if I have a look at dressing change, I'll just edit that from here, but obviously we've got the form components code table as well. But when you configure this, you say, what's the name I want this to appear as on the form? We then have this section here that's grayed out because I'm already using it, but this one here would normally be where you say this is a date field, or this is free text, or it's a tick box, or it's a drop down list. So we now have a new option called charge item, and then we can say, do they have to complete it or not? We can say whether it's issued by default or not. On mine, I left them off and you had to positively select them. You could do it the other way and have people uncheck the things they didn't do if you really wanted to do that. And then down at the bottom, we've got the charge item I'm linking it to. So in this case, that £25 dressing change. So we also have, you can see here on the grayed out bit, we've also got collection. So if you want to, if you have, a set of charges that would issue based on the nurse doing something, then you could actually make this a charge collection, and then one tick could actually explode 5 or 6 items straight away onto the patient's account if that was how you were working. So I think this would be something really good to have a look at in your test systems and see whether you can find some uses for it. See if you can start to look at replacing those sort of outpatient charge sheets that might float around the department and eventually make their way back to reception and things like that, and see whether you can sort of speed that process up a little. So that was the last thing that I was going to go through from my demo. What we'll do is we'll just bring up the slides, and I will take some questions. Okay. So just before we go on to questions, all the items that you've seen today across the builds 845 to 847 are in the release notes. As we've been through before, the little camera icon on the right hand side there of our release notes portal will show you individual videos for how each of those are going to work. So go and have a look at those as you're doing your testing and see what new features you can make use of. And what we'll do is we'll move on to questions. So got a few, which is good. So okay, so the first one, with the procedure default site, will this not be available as an import or export? So this goes back to what I showed on the slide deck and what I've spoken about when I was adding that procedure. So we're doing a W3712. Can we get it to auto populate with HIP as the procedure site? Yes, it will work off import and export. So you could take all your procedure code table out and update it. The only thing you need to be aware of with that is that you need to populate the procedure site with the code for the site, not the name of it. So what you might do is go through and fill it out with names, so hip, knee, eye, head, whatever body part. And then what you might do separately is a find and replace on that list to say, okay, anywhere I've put hip, replace it with whatever the primary code is for that. But it would be, for whoever asked this question, it would be a quicker way to import that data rather than needing to go through and edit each one through the front end of Compucare. So however you want to do it. Okay, so second question regarding the application speed test improvements. So yeah, the location utilization scheduler. So that was a screen that we put in about a year or so ago and is there to show you for the next 14 days, show me my theatres and what's happening in the morning, the afternoon and things like that. Obviously, there's quite a lot of data for it to bring back for that. So I can imagine that screen would be a little slower than normal. There might be some things we can do to speed it up. So on that front, we'll log a user story with the development team to have a look at in a future release, and we can see whether there's any code changes that could make that screen more efficient the way it's been pulled up. The only thing I would say is, how much data do you need to see on screen at once? I would think, probably 14 days worth might be enough. If you're trying to bring back a whole month, are you really using a whole month at the time you're looking at it? So there might be some incremental improvements you could make yourselves, but we'll certainly log it for the future. So, okay, so the third one here. This is for the feature that Mark presented around duplicate patients, like if we're importing patients from PAS. So this is from an NHS customer, then one of our private patient units. So if you're searching for John Smith and bringing John Smith back from PAS, then the new feature that Mark's shown you wouldn't really be applicable to you because PAS is your master system for patient records. So you've still got within Compucare the duplicate checker screen anyway. So if you want to have a look and see, have we got any duplicate private patients in the system, you could search for and get a list out of those. But because PAS is your master, rather than merging straight in Compucare, it's likely that you would go and merge the records in PAS if they were duplicates. So whether that's Cerner or Epic or Allscripts or whatever it is that you're using. And then the merges would flow down to Compucare. So I think probably the feature that Mark's shown you, whilst useful, is probably more for the private hospitals, the clinics, anyone who's not got an NHS PAS plugged into Compucare, essentially. And the final one then here is around sort of the patient duplicate checker. So that one seems popular. And are we going to put that in the Clinicians app or is it just in Compucare? So at the moment, it's just in Compucare. So we expect that, for any hospitals receiving referrals directly, they'll be, or self-referrals and things like that, they'll be keyed into Compucare. I can see the question that's being asked, and if you've got medical secretaries using the app, registering potential new patients and booking them in, could we try and prompt it there? Right now, it won't do it. We're actually going to be rewriting that Clinicians app sort of middle of next year onwards. So we'll log that feature for when we rewrite that app as something new to consider when we modernize the app. So yeah, watch this space for that one. We'll certainly get that logged. I'm just going to check the other questions and see if we've had anything else, and then otherwise I think we're just about there. So. Okay, we've got one here around the charges that we saw on a form, and currently asking whether it would also cover procedures. So right now, no, it wouldn't cover procedures. We would expect that the actual procedures field would be what you used for to record a procedure, because then that's obviously going to have the procedure there that then we can pull that out on reporting properly. It's going to explode the minor into sort of procedure charge automatically and things like that. So at the moment, no, it just does bare charges or charge collections. We could potentially log a future enhancement to ask for that to be done. We probably just need to think about the outpatient nursing procedures or otherwise that might be needed for that. So yeah, we'll reach out to some of the customers, or if whoever raised that question wants to come back to us directly, we can have a chat about that one and see whether it makes sense to also have procedures addable via forms as well. Okay, so just looking at the questions, I don't think we've got anything else. So really all there is left to do is just say thank you for joining us this morning for the webinar. We hope you found it useful. A recording of it will be up on our YouTube channel within the next few days. Compucare 847, so the autumn release that we've just presented, will be available within the next few days. You'll get a notification around that. And yeah, if anyone thinks of anything at all, please come back to us. Contact details are there if you've got any questions that you think of later. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining us. That's great.